Good morning and welcome. I'm Tracy Strading, Director of the Michigan Assistive Technology Loan Funds at MI-UCP, and I'm happy to introduce our speaker, Clayton Jewell. Clayton, or Clay, is a licensed and registered occupational therapist, certified driver rehabilitation specialist, and founder of Automobility Driver Rehabilitation in Grand Rapids. Clay specializes in providing clinical and behind-the-wheel evaluations, training, and consultation in adaptive driving and community mobility for individuals with a wide range of abilities. He has a master's degree in science in occupational therapy from Western Michigan University, and he's an active member of the Association for Driver Rehabilitation Specialists and serves on the Michigan Governor's Traffic Safety Advisory Commission. I'm going to turn it over to Clay. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. I know there are a lot of words, big words in there for different organizations and things. So yeah, my name is Clay Jewell. As Tracy said, I reside in Grand Rapids. I have a driver rehabilitation program here. I've been here doing driver rehab for about 8 or 9 years in Grand Rapids. The last 3 years have been in private practice with Automobility. I got my start in driver rehab working through Mary Freebed Rehabilitation Hospital. They closed their program, and then I moved on and started up this program because it was kind of a missing, or a lacking service in the area once Mary Freebed was closing their program. So I'm going to go ahead and start the slideshow. Okay. All right, so today during this presentation, these are some of our learning objectives. I'm going to give a basic overview of the driver rehab process, just kind of how that all works and flows. Then we're going to talk about some different vehicle modifications and adaptive driving equipment. And then we're going to touch a little bit on funding for driver rehab services and adaptive equipment, because that, of course, is a very important consideration. Again, my name is Clay Jewell. As Tracy said, I'm an occupational therapist. I'm a certified driver rehabilitation specialist, and I'm also a certified driving instructor. Here you can see my family. This is us tubing last winter. This is one of the reasons why I think driving is so important, because to get out here to the tubing hill out at Cannonsburg, we had to drive there. There are certainly many ways people can get around, but driving is very important, especially in Michigan, especially in areas that don't have much in the way of public transit. Driving can be a very important way for somebody to get around, get out and do the things that they need to do and want to do for fun. So as a driver rehabilitation specialist, I am a member of an organization called ADED. This organization is very important to me. We are a relatively small organization, but ADED covers specialists across the United States and Canada, as well as in some other countries. We really work hard as an organization to set standards, to credential the certified specialists, to make sure that everybody has, a good, comes from a place of education and a good understanding of the principles that we use in driver rehab. So to be part of this organization, anybody can be a part of the organization, but to be a certified driver rehab specialist, then we have some different things we need to go through. So for me as an occupational therapist, I had to earn many hours of experience in the world of driver rehab, and then I had to sit for a national certification exam to be certified to do this. And as I said, we're a relatively small organization across the United States. There's about, that says 350 members, or CDRSs. We actually getting close to 400 now. I think we're at 380 something. The goal is for there to be 400 in the next year. In Michigan, I believe we're somewhere around like 12 CDRSs. So we could use a few more in Michigan. So if you know somebody who's interested in this, you can always give them my information. I'm happy to talk to people about it anytime. Again, also a certified driving instructor. In Michigan, if I'm going to work with somebody in the I'm in the passenger seat, they're in the driver's seat, and I'm providing instruction, I do have to be licensed as a driving instructor to do that. So that was some additional training that I had to do, some additional coursework, and another license that I have to maintain to stay current on that. So who are my clients? Who are the people that I'm working with? I see pretty much all ages, anyone who's old enough to drive. I should say that I'll see people who are young, but not old enough to drive, but I only consult as far as vehicle modifications for them as a passenger. But for drivers specifically, I'll see people from ages 14 and 9 months up to 100 and even beyond sometimes. I'll see folks with a number of different backgrounds, some different diagnoses. This here is a list of some of the most common things that I see. Coming from Mary Free Bed Rehab Hospital, I will see a lot of people after they've had an injury. So traumatic brain injury, spinal cord, other traumatic injuries are a big part of the population that I see. I also will see folks with developmental conditions and other neurological conditions, as you see listed there, as well as people with vision impairments, if they are able to drive. And I'll talk about that a little bit more later too. So driver rehab, when I see someone, typically I always do need a referral from a physician. So a person may see their doctor and say, hey, the patient says, hey, I think I could drive, or I want to try to drive and see what I can do. Then the doctor can refer them to occupational therapy, driver rehabilitation. I will see them the first day. We complete what we call a comprehensive driving evaluation. This is pretty standard across the driver rehab world. This is how everybody would start. So we do, the comprehensive evaluation has two parts. The first part is a clinical evaluation. So we would typically I'll meet people at my office in Grand Rapids. We have a clinic space there. We'll get together and we'll go through a number of things. Always starts with an interview, getting to know the person who's wanting to drive. I want to know about their background. I want to know about their strengths, any challenges they have in all these different areas. So we spend a lot of time talking about them and their history and as well as their goals. What do they want to achieve? Some people have the goal of, hey, I just want to be able to get in my vehicle, get to the grocery store, get to church. I want to stay right near home pretty much, but I need that, I need that independence. Some people say, no, I want to travel across the country. I want to, I don't want any kind of limitations. So we always keep that in mind too and work towards the person's goals. So other things we're looking at, everyone that I see, we're going to test vision. Vision is very important for driving, obviously. So there are certain standards legally that the state has. And so I have to check each person to make sure they meet the standards for licensing in Michigan, as far as visual acuity and field of vision. And then we're also looking at visual processing speed and scanning, things like visual motor control, a whole list of different things. The clinical evaluation that I do usually takes about an hour and a half to get through everything that we cover. Again, looking at all these different areas. and it's going to be focused, we'll focus it in different areas depending on someone's challenges or someone's strengths. So if it's somebody who has, a physical condition where maybe they have limited strength in their upper body, we're going to spend a lot of time, checking their range of motion and their doing manual muscle testing, checking their strength in their hands and their arms and seeing, just where they are. So to make sure once we get in the vehicle, they're getting the at least, a good fit, or at least a good starting point on the proper equipment that they might need. The second part of a comprehensive driving evaluation is a behind the wheel evaluation. I can see just about anybody for a clinical evaluation, but for the behind the wheel evaluation, the individual does need to have a permit or a current driver's license. So if they don't have that, when I see them for the clinical, I can help them figure out how to get that. Basically that requires going to Secretary of State, taking a written test, and getting that permit. That's for someone who's over 18. For teenagers, it's a bit different, and I won't go into all that detail. But so once they have that permit or license, then I can see them for the behind the wheel evaluation. I have this broken into two categories because they're really two different types of evaluations. For some folks who they don't need any equipment, maybe they have a vision issue, maybe they've had a stroke and they feel like they're ready to resume driving, but they don't have any real physical challenges that we have to think about. We're just more testing their safety and whether they're ready to resume driving or not. So for this one, we would follow a standardized route that includes a variety of different traffic situations. We're going to go through a number of different situations, different types of traffic lights, stop signs. These are typically people who are already licensed drivers or who have been licensed drivers in the past. So we're going to go through this whole route. It takes about an hour to get through the route, and then we get back to the office and we go over things. So sometimes that goes very well. Someone is driving safely. They appear like they're ready. They appear that they're ready to resume driving. So then I will write a recommendation for them to resume driving. The second case may be where there are some concerns that come up on the road. So then I might recommend extending the evaluation to another session, or doing some training to try to remediate or teach them some compensatory strategies to overcome some of the challenges that they're having on the road. The third case, unfortunately, there are times where I recommend that someone not drive. My goal is always to help people be as independent as possible, but there are situations where, perhaps a person is not, doesn't have the cognitive skills to drive, or they don't have the visual skills to drive. So that's a longer conversation. And this is, what I provide is a recommendation. It's not a final say. I'm not a licensing authority. So if I don't feel someone is safe to drive, I can't take away their license if they already have one. What I do is in any of these cases, I will write up a report with my recommendations, and I'll send that back to the referring physician. And that's a conversation to have with their doctor. I will have the conversation with them too, but it's not just me telling them yes or no. I'm giving my professional opinion and my input. So then the other type of evaluation, this is an adaptive equipment evaluation. This gives us, for those drivers who may need or who may benefit from some adaptive driving equipment, this gives us a chance to try out some things. I do have a number of different types of hand controls and other types of equipment. This is our opportunity to get out in the vehicle and try some of this stuff out. Typically, I'm going to start with someone in a parking lot. My office is right near Calvin College, so they do have some nice big parking lots, and we'll a lot of times go over there kind of just as a place to try some things out, let somebody get warmed up to the equipment before we go out into any sort of traffic situations. But in many cases during that evaluation, even if it's their first time driving, we may end up out on the road and doing some driving in low traffic situations. And then following the drive, we're gonna have at least a basic idea of what kind of equipment they'll need. It may not necessarily be the exact equipment that they end up using long term, but it's a good starting point, and it's our chance to set a training plan and then set some goals for training. When it comes to training, there's going to be a wide range of the amount of training, the type of training, the focus on training, because people do have different experience. So like I said, I see many drivers many clients who already are a driver. They've been a driver in the past, but now they have a medical condition which has changed their functional driving ability. And so now we're needing to do the adaptive equipment. Many of these drivers, we're going to spend, say they're using hand controls, we're going to spend maybe 6 to 10 hours of training, sometimes more, but typically 6 hours is about a minimum in most cases. Most people, even as an experienced driver, need that amount of time behind the wheel with a driver rehab specialist to really get comfortable, to really kind of get in the groove and used to the equipment. Because when they're done with driver rehab, they're on their own. They're out in their own, they're getting equipment in their own vehicle and they're driving independently. So we need to make sure that the equipment it truly is a good fit for them, and that they are ready to go off and do things on their own without the need for me to be sitting there next to them. So we would go through training. So I'll give an example that, okay, somebody needs hand controls. We do the eval, we go through our 6 to 10 hours of training. The final step in that training process is a road test with Secretary of State. Anybody, even if somebody already has their driver's license, the state of Michigan does, it's a little bit of a gray area in the traffic law, but they do request that anybody who needs adaptive equipment have that added to their driver's license. So what the state does is they do a road test with somebody using the equipment, just so they can demonstrate that they're able to use that. And the way that we do that with my program is I will typically set up the road test with the Secretary of State. I'll accompany my client to their test. I communicate with the Secretary of State analyst who does the test. And then, in most cases, they pass and things go well, and they simply add the adaptive equipment to the person's driver's license. I think it's important to do that because it gets on their license and then they don't have to worry about it in the future. If anyone ever questioned, well, why are you using hand controls? That's not standard equipment. They can show that I've been trained to use this, I'm licensed to use this. And also many vendors who install the equipment will not install it until somebody has the equipment on their driver's license. So once they have that equipment on their license, they can go ahead and get the equipment installed in their own vehicle. This is, when they're done with their tests, I write out equipment prescription. Basically like any other prescription you would take to the drugstore. This is a prescription for the equipment. So the person, it says that they've been trained, it says that they passed their road test, and I'll list out the specific equipment that the person would need in their own vehicle. They can take their vehicle then to a vendor. There are a couple of them in Grand Rapids, and there are some others across the state. I'll mention that again later. And so then they get the equipment installed in their own vehicle. And the final thing with this is what's called the conformance inspection. This is something that I always recommend. So when I recommend adaptive equipment, at the end of, once the equipment's installed in the person's vehicle, I would meet up with them again. I would meet up with my client one last time in their own vehicle with their own equipment, look everything over, make sure it's installed the way we intended. And then normally I'll ride along with my client on their first drive in their own vehicle. To me, that is one of the the most exciting parts of my job is when I get to the end with somebody and they have their vehicle equipped and I get to hop in their vehicle and they can drive me around. And, usually they're very excited and happy to be back on the road again, or on the road for, independently for the first time. So that's one of the rewarding parts of my job. And then I also mentioned here new drivers. I do see new drivers, someone who's never driven before. They are going to require, typically going to require more training. Just like anybody that's completely new to something, we're going to typically spend 20 hours or more possibly. That's where sometimes funding sources can be very important, because it does get costly if somebody has to pay for all the training on their own. So I will mention some things about funding later on too. Another thing that I will provide, sometimes this is a separate thing, or sometimes it's just part of our training process. We call it a vehicle and equipment assessment. Basically, this is where, in most cases, it's someone who's a wheelchair user. We're going to look at some different things. We're going to try to look at what is the best vehicle for this person to drive. We've already looked at what is the driving equipment, how are they going to operate the vehicle? But the other question is, how do they get in the vehicle? How do they get out of the vehicle? How do they transport their mobility device? How are they going to be seated in the vehicle when they drive? So we've got a number of things to look at. Yes.
We just got a question. It says, Jeffrey's asking, do you have a limit on the modifications you can provide for the vehicle you use for the behind the wheel evaluation?
Yes, that's a good question. I do think I'll touch on that just a little bit later too. So driver rehab, we're kind of broken down into a couple of different categories when it comes to vehicles and equipment. There's what we call low tech driver rehab, and then there's high tech driver rehab. And I think this may be what you're getting at. So the low tech is what I do. So I'll see, and I'll show you some pictures of the types of equipment that I use and that I have. So I can see someone using, mechanical hand controls, just sort of like the basic electronic hand controls, left foot accelerators, a number of other things. That's considered low tech. High tech would be somebody who needs, more extensive equipment. There is equipment out there that's completely electronic. It's basically all electronic. So this would be like, this individual would be able to drive a van equipped with nothing but like a joystick. You can use a joystick to move the van forward, to stop it, to turn it, or two joysticks. There's a number of different ways they can do that. That is equipment that I don't have access to, unfortunately, for that high-tech driving. So this would a lot of times would be somebody who drives while seated in their power wheelchair or in their wheelchair. So in that case, in cases like that, I do have other providers that I can connect people with. This is an area that, unfortunately, in Michigan, we're kind of short on high-tech driving programs. Mary Free Bed, when I was there, we used to have a high-tech program, but the hospital, their van got too old and they sold it around 2015, never repurchased a new vehicle. So we never had anything to replace it with. Unfortunately, there was a program also out of the Lansing area. Unfortunately, they've sold their high-tech van. So people that need that service are currently having to go through a program out of Illinois, Northern Illinois, or someone comes up from Ohio, the Columbus area. So it is an area that's lacking in Michigan, and I hope somebody can come along and fill that void, because it is an important service. I currently am not able to provide that. I'm a single provider, and the cost of a van is very high and to purchase and maintain. So, but if that ever changes, I will try to make that known. But if I did see you for a clinical eval and we knew that this equipment that I have is not going to be suitable, or appropriate for a person's needs, then I could refer them on to one of those high-tech programs. All right. Another thing that I will do is a passenger vehicle assessment. So this would be somebody who's not a driver. They don't really plan to be a driver, although some may become a driver in the future. But it's typically people who, they need to be, need help with transportation. A lot of times they're seated in a wheelchair, throughout the day, and they need to travel while seated in their wheelchair. So I can consult with them, with their family, with their significant other, and help them figure out, what is the best vehicle for this person. How do they, load their device? How do they get themselves in and out of the vehicle? It may be somebody also who just needs, to haul along, an extra wheelchair or scooter, and so I can give them information on equipment that they can use to do that, and then connect them with a dealer who sells that equipment. So now I'll get in a little bit into some of the specifics on some of the equipment that's out there. Like I said, there are a lot of things out there. There's the low tech, there's the high tech. I'll talk mostly today about some of the low tech stuff, simply because, like I said, I'm not able to offer that high tech equipment. So things that we consider with equipment. First would be the primary controls. These are the driving controls. These are the things that make the vehicle go. So, your gas, your brake, your steering. That when I say primary controls, that's what I'm referring to. Anything that operates and moves the vehicle or controls the vehicle itself. Secondary controls are all those other things that we need to use while we're driving. Things like your turn signals, your windshield wipers, your horn. They are not necessary for movement of the vehicle. They don't control the vehicle, but they are important. So we always look at those too and make sure that somebody's able to access and use those secondary controls. And then the other thing is wheelchair management, mobility device management. How do we load our mobility device? How are we going to access the vehicle? So those are other equipment pieces that we want to consider.
I have a couple of things if you'd like, Clay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So one of them is Jeffrey saying thanks. He's got your answer. Thank you. That was from the question earlier. And then Dolores shared, after being in a coma and on a ventilator, then rehabilitation, it was almost a year before I could drive again. And I had occupational therapy and physical therapy, no rehabilitation for driving. My daughter and son-in-law did it slowly for me. I wish we'd known about this program. So that's her comment.
Yeah.
And then Joseph says, are there any vehicles that do not lend themselves to these accommodations, or is there a vehicle you would recommend?
Yeah, I do have a slide coming up about what types of vehicles are good for modification. So I'll hold on to that one for a minute and you'll see some of that coming up. But that's a very good question. And then, yeah, after an injury, driver rehab has been around for, really since like the 70s was some of the first programs started up. So it's been around quite a while, but not everyone's aware of it. Some physicians aren't even aware of it. And like I said, it's usually physician referral driven. So if a doctor doesn't decide, to recommend driver rehab for somebody, they may never come and see a program like mine. I do think it's beneficial for a lot of folks though, because, like I said, we do all this testing. We're looking at different skills that are important to drive. And then once we do go out on the road, it's in a controlled manner. So, I've got dual controls on my side. I've got a gas and brake on the passenger side. I'm a trained evaluator and instructor. So, I can help somebody progress at the just right pace. And so they're not getting into situations they're not ready for. And then if they do need some training and things like that, then we have that as an option. So. Hand controls. So these are some of the types of hand controls that I have in my vehicle. This is not all inclusive, but these are some of the common ones that you may see. That first picture on the left, that is called a push rock hand control. Now, all the mechanical hand controls like this, the low tech hand controls, they're always referred to as a push something. The push just refers to the braking. On all these controls, you're going to push forward on the handle grip, push it forward to brake. And it's basically a rod that's attached to the brake pedal. So when I push in that hand control, push it toward the dash, that's going to push in my brake pedal for me. This allows someone with limited or no use or loss of sensation in their lower body. It allows them to drive with just using their hands, just their upper body. So that first one's a push rock. The second one looks like it's a push pull. So I'm just pushing forward for brake, pulling straight back for gas. Those are on the left side. And that third one is called it's also a push pull, but it's on the right side. So some people may benefit from having a right side hand control, just depending on their needs. So again, this is why it's important for us to do the clinical eval and see what are someone's strengths, what are their limitations, is their right side stronger than their left, and so a lot of different factors go into choosing which hand controls are the best for this individual. It's very customized. And then typically with hand controls or with other equipment, we're going to use something else for steering. If someone's using mechanical hand controls, they may use something as simple as that top left picture. That's just a steering knob. It's just some people call it a spinner knob. It's something for them to grip onto. It spins, turns as you turn the wheel. So it's kind of freely moving inside its base. That's because you'll only have, if you're using a hand control with your left hand, you'll only have one hand free for steering. So this allows you to grip firmly on that steering knob and steer more easily just one-handed. Just below that one with the lower left, that is called a tri-pin steering device. That is often for someone who has very limited or no hand grip. So maybe someone who has, say, like a tetraplegic injury or quadriplegic level injury, spinal cord injury, and they lose most of their ability to firmly grip. This allows them to, those two pins on the bottom go on either side of their wrist fairly snugly, and then they can loosely hold on to that pin at the top, and that allows them to hold on to the steering device and maintain control. And then the upper right is a steering wheel extension. This may be someone who has shorter length arms than average. This brings the wheel a little bit closer to them. It's a smaller diameter, so if their arms are not as long, or if they're shorter arms, then it's easier for them to be able to steer. They don't have to reach up and out so far for the steering wheel. And then that lower right is another type of steering device. We call it a V-grip. That's also for someone who would have limited gripping ability. That little white piece on the side kind of presses against their palm, and it fits pretty snugly, so they don't have to be able to firmly grip that. Other things we can look at, these are modifications to the pedals themselves. So number one, that is an electronic left foot accelerator. So that pedal over to the left, it's basically just another gas pedal that gets installed in the vehicle, and it's mounted to the left side of the brake. Reason why someone might use this would be if they had a limitation only with their right leg, but their left leg was still functional for driving. They still have normal sensation and movement use of their left leg. Then they might be able to use an electronic or a mechanical left foot accelerator. So sometimes if someone has a stroke that affects the right side of their body, or just really anybody who has that limitation on the right side, sometimes someone who who has an amputation of their right leg, then we might need to use the left foot accelerator. Now, the left foot accelerator also requires training. Typically, it's about the same amount of training as hand controls. It seems very simple, right? It's just another pedal. The challenge with it, though, is if somebody's been driving for years and the gas pedal has always been to the right of the brake, we're taking that and flipping it. So now the gas pedal's to the left of the brake. And so it's simple in the way that it works, but it's also easy to mess up. So we've got to do training and make sure somebody's consistent with that. They're consistently, getting their foot on the correct pedal. We're not making any errors where we hit the brake when we mean to hit, or hit the gas when we want to hit the brake. I don't want somebody doing that once they're done with me. So when I drive with them, we want to get to a point where they're consistently and accurately and safely using those pedals before they would move on from driver rehab. The third one there, number 3, is those are pedal extensions. So if somebody is shorter stature, has shorter legs, they can extend those pedals, and there's a range of sizes that those can come in. I can't think of them exactly off the top of my head, but I know you can go at least 2 inches, as far as I think 10 or 12 inches of extension. So that is another option for some people. Again, these are all things that I have in my vehicle. If I saw somebody, we could potentially use one of these items. And then the secondary controls, these are, like I said earlier, the secondary controls are going to control things like your turn signals, your wipers, your windshield wash, your horn, headlight, dimmer, cruise control. There are special controls for gear selection. So instead of using a shifter, a person could add like a touch screen, an aftermarket touch screen to move their vehicle from park into drive or reverse, etc. So there's a number of options here. That first one is just a little switch that can be mounted on a hand control, and it can be programmed to do the turn signals or the wipers or the horn. It just depends on the person's abilities and depends on the vehicle as far as where those items are located and if they're within reach of the person or not. That second item there is a steering device, like a steering knob, but it has it's also like a remote control. So it has buttons that control things like the wipers, turn signals, horn, all that kind of stuff. That one's pretty neat. I really like that, but it is expensive. So that's one of the drawbacks with it, is it's quite costly. And then the third item there, some people may have seen these. Sometimes they call them jelly bean switches. Those can be used in other situations. Sometimes they put them on wheelchairs for moving a wheelchair, like the tilt and recline and things like that. But they can also install those in a vehicle, and they can be connected to a module that will control things like your wipers and horn and all that kind of stuff. These are just pictures that I took in my vehicle. I don't know if you can see it really well. I have a low-tech solution there for turn signal. Underneath the steering wheel, there's like a little rod that sticks out over on the right side. That's a turn signal extension. So it's low-tech. It just clamps right on the steering wheel. And so somebody, if they're using their right hand for the turn, it enables somebody to use their right hand to activate the turn signals. These are some examples of some high-tech controls. That picture on the left is from ADAD. That's one of their images that they allow us to use for presentations. That young lady has got a whole setup there. It looks like she's using a joystick control. You see the joystick control there. It almost looks like it's the joystick for her wheelchair, but the joystick for her wheelchair is actually over to the right. So she pushes that out of the way, and then she pulls up and uses the joystick for the van. Again, high tech, very good option for people who may need that. It is quite costly, and so a lot of times that's a big factor. Somebody has to consider the cost of all the equipment, whether that's within their budget. You know, so there are a lot of questions there. That's, again, these are situations where I would refer someone to a specialized high-tech program. The one on the right is pretty cool. That's a couple things you see there. There's the two tri-pins, one on either side of the steering wheel. So someone would roll up there in their wheelchair, lock in place. That control on the left, with the tri-pin on it, that slides forward and back. So I would slide forward and back, and that does my gas and brake. And it's low effort. So somebody just has to be able to loosely, you know, grasp that device, and they move their arm forward, pull it back, and requires pretty low effort. And then on the right side, there's another tri-pin mounted on, if you look closely, it's mounted on like a little wheel. That's actually their steering wheel. They call that a servo, or like a reduced horizontal wheel. So the person just has to put their hand in there, and then they turn their vehicle by horizontally rotating, moving that wheel around, and it is horizontal. So that's pretty cool. Again, cost is a lot of times the factor. You know, there are a number of things that can be done if somebody has the financial resources for it. Then I'll talk a little bit about wheelchair loading. So, you know, if somebody is using adaptive equipment like hand controls, you know, they may very well also be using a wheelchair, and they need to load that somehow in their vehicle once they get in. So these two pictures here are kind of, you know, a couple solutions that some people have used. That first one is just basically this guy transferred into his car, and then what he does is he breaks down his chair. It's a rigid frame chair that allows him to, you know, pop the wheels off and fold down the seat back. So he gets in, takes it apart, and then he brings it in, you know, one piece at a time. Usually we'll then set it like on the passenger seat or in the passenger position. It can be a good solution for some folks. It's kind of, I always say it's kind of a young person's solution, just because, you know, it does require that upper body strength to pick that up and move it across to the other side of the seat. I don't love it because it is hard. You know, it's kind of hard on the shoulders sometimes, and there's a little bit of wear and tear on your back, bending down and picking that up. So it's not the most ergonomic solution, but I've had a lot of young people who say, you know, I can do that just fine. I'm young, healthy, no problem. And if they're able to do it safely, then good for them. But it is, you know, it can be challenging. The picture on the right, that is, if you notice the back door, they've reversed the swing on that door. So they moved the hinges to the back of the door, and they added a handle to the front, so the door opens out that way. That would enable somebody to get in the driver's seat and then put their mobility device in the back seat behind them more easily. The one challenge with this is making sure that they can then, once they're in the driver's seat, that they can actually reach that rear door and close it once they have their wheelchair in there. So sometimes that's a challenge. Here's a couple other options. That one on the left, that is a pickup. You can see it's got the driver's seat is actually on like a swivel. It rotates and then it lowers outside of the vehicle. So it has a motorized mechanism underneath it. They changed the base underneath it, so that allows somebody to bring with a remote control, bring the seat out of the truck. They can transfer to the driver's seat, and then they can ride the seat up into the truck. And then in the back end, if you look closely, you can see the wheelchair is there. There's also a powered loading device with a cable on it. They hook that on their chair, again with a remote control. It can lift up their wheelchair and then swing it around into the back of the truck. And this one also has a topper on it that is also motorized and has a remote control. So then it can, once the chair is in, the topper can close, and then it keeps the wheelchair, you know, out of the elements. If it's raining or snowing, that chair is staying dry inside the bed of that truck with the topper. So it's a cool solution. You know, I'll get folks who, you know, they really want to drive a truck, you know, or they need to drive a truck for work or for whatever reason. You know, this is an option for them. Next to that is one of my favorite solutions. It's called a Speedy Lift. That's the brand name. It's Adapt Solutions Speedy Lift. It's like a brand name. Basically, the lady in that picture is sitting on a little platform. So she transfers from her wheelchair to that little platform outside of the vehicle. And then behind her in the rear passenger position, there's a loading device. It's got a little arm that comes out. It grabs onto the back of her wheelchair and it just pulls it in behind her. It's pretty quick, which is probably why they call it the Speedy Lift. It's a nice solution for someone who's able to transfer like that and sit, have the trunk control to sit outside the vehicle like that. It does typically work best with, or it requires a rigid frame chair. And then the other consideration is the width of the chair and the width of that door. A lot of times that passenger door is not super wide. So we got to make sure that the chair will actually fit through that doorway for this solution to work. These are some other options. These would be for somebody who is able to walk a short distance, or for a caregiver or significant other to assist with loading a device. These are a couple options where this lady's got a scooter. The one on the left, it's a cable that hooks on the scooter and picks it up and then swings it into the back of her van. The other one is a little platform that she drives onto. They call this one a Joey lift. Basically, she drives onto the platform and then it picks up the chair or the scooter and the platform and brings the whole thing into the back of the van. So there's nothing left outside of the van, which is nice. Then it's not getting wet or snowy or anything like that. Another option would be to enter the vehicle while seated in the wheelchair. So this would be a vehicle that has a ramp or a lift and allows a person to roll into the vehicle and secure themselves in the chair, or transfer and also secure their chair. So these are a couple examples of that. There's a Chevy Traverse and a Toyota Sienna. Those are a couple options that are out there. Here's in that situation where somebody entered their vehicle, they're going to transfer to the driver's seat. So that seat, driver's seat is on a base which rotates and slides forward and back as well as up and down. They call it a 6-way power seat. So this gentleman would wheel up the ramp into his van, turn around, and then he has a little remote control to move his driver's seat back. And then he can more easily do a lateral transfer there where he's got more room, and then use the remote to move his driver's seat back up into the driver's position and then take off. This is an option that would allow somebody to drive while seated in their wheelchair. So they call this an easy lock. That's a brand name. There are other companies that make that. So I'm not advocating for just easy lock, but it seems like most people refer to them as an easy lock because they've been around for a long time. If you look at the wheelchair on the right, this is the bottom of the chair. They have to install a bracket on the chair, and it has like a little pin that hangs down. Basically, the person drives up into that easy lock device. It's kind of like if you've ever seen a fifth wheel hitch, where there's like a pin that locks the trailer to the truck. That's how this works. The person drives up into that hitch or that easy lock that automatically grabs hold of that pin and secures their chair in place. And then they just can put on their seatbelt and take off. And then to get out of it, they just have a remote control or a push button where they hit the button, it will unlock their chair and they can back out of that easy lock. So vehicles that can be modified. Adaptive driving controls can be installed in most vehicles. Okay, so I can put hand controls in just about anything. You saw the picture of the guy earlier who just had a little sedan, and he broke down his wheelchair and put it in piece by piece. So they can put that in anything. But when I talk about modifying a vehicle, I'm talking about doing a more of like a structural conversion. So there are very specific things here that need to be considered. I would say if somebody has a vehicle that they already own and they want to modify it, or if they're looking to buy a vehicle to be modified, the best thing to do is to talk to, you can talk to a CDRS like myself, but also talk to a mobility equipment dealer who has experience with that, and they can tell you, which vehicles are able to be modified, which are not. So the minivans, I should have included on here SUVs and crossovers because they are doing those now, some of them. So minivans, like I showed earlier, the Toyota Sienna, Chrysler Pacifica, the Dodge Grand Caravan, which is no longer, they're no longer making that, so they're not doing that conversion anymore. But that is one that you may see out there as a used vehicle. There's also the Honda Odyssey, the Chevy Traverse you saw. They did the Ford Explorer a few years back, but they've stopped doing that one as well. So those options are out there. There's also full-size vans, which is the full-size vans used to be kind of a big part of this this market for modified vehicles. When they had the Ford full-size Ford Econoline vans, you would see those a lot with the lift on them. You're not seeing as many of those now as those start to get older, because they stopped making the Ford Econoline back in, I want to say it was 2015, 2014. But now they'll do things like the Ford Transit or the Dodge Sprinter, or the Mercedes. It's the Mercedes Sprinter, actually, the Dodge ProMaster. So those are some options that are out there. But you don't see as many full-size vans. They are quite a bit larger than those Econoline vans were, and a lot of people may not want a vehicle that big. And then the other option could be pickup trucks. I showed you the one with the pickup that has the seat that comes out, the loader in the bed. So that's another option. Like I said, best thing to do if considering a vehicle would be to talk with a NMEDA dealer. So NMEDA, I should say, that stands for National Mobility Equipment Dealers Association. They are a national organization, kind of like ADED for driver rehab. NMEDA is for the equipment dealers. In Grand Rapids, we have two of them. There's Clock Mobility and Creative Mobility. There are some others across the state. Mobility Works is one of them. Superior Van and Mobility. So these are all dealers and installers who have some pretty strict safety standards that they have to follow, and pretty credentialing that they have to have. So I do always recommend, if you are going to have adaptive equipment installed or purchase a modified vehicle, that you go through a NMEDA member dealer, just because they do have those stringent standards, and that's going to be the safest option out there. There are other dealers out there who are not certified, and they will do a number of different things. But like I said, I always recommend using one of these NMEDA dealers. Okay, here's an example of the, I believe that is a Ford Transit on the left. So it is a bit larger, but this one would have a full-size lift. A lot of times they do like a full-size commercial lift. So if somebody has a large power wheelchair, those things are very heavy. So sometimes that could be an option for someone in that situation if they've got a lot of weight to pick up and put into the to get into the van. This one does not allow a driver to drive while seated in their wheelchair, though. So that's one of the drawbacks. You could put a transfer seat, like I showed, the 6-way power seat that slides back and pivots, but you cannot drive this van seated in the wheelchair, just because of the way the floor is constructed on the van. It's not possible. Maybe at some point they'll change that, but right now with the design, that's not an option. I like this one on the right. This is somebody who had a lift installed in their motorhome. I think that's pretty cool. So, one of your Namita dealers, vendors could potentially install something like this, like clock mobility. I've seen a couple conversions where they've done motorhomes and trailers, and it's pretty cool. It allows people to still get out and camp and do those kinds of things that they want to do. Couple other, well, I showed you the one truck modification earlier. This one on the left, that is a company called ATC Conversions. They're out of Indiana. They have an actual, like a powered platform that lowers outside of the vehicle. They weld the doors together on the side and then hinge it at the top, and it's all powered. So you hit a button, that door opens like a gull wing, flips up, the seat comes down to the ground, you can transfer and then get into the truck. Sometimes the challenge with this one is, how do you load your wheelchair once you're in there? So you could potentially do like the loader in the bed that picks up the chair, depending on the chair. Some wheelchairs would be compatible where they would actually be able to remove that seat, and you could drive while seated in the wheelchair. Dimensions are very specific here, though. There are certain, the space is tight, so there are only certain chairs that are actually going to fit on that platform and work. So that one is very important. If somebody is considering that, very important to get fitted for that. Go through the dealer, go try the truck, try getting in and out of it, making sure it's a good fit. That's something I would say with any of the modifications, is that before purchasing something or committing to something, that you try it first. Make sure you can get into it with your wheelchair. Make sure you can get out. Make sure you have enough room to transfer if you're going to transfer. And if you're going to drive the vehicle, then there's even more to consider to make sure it's a proper fit for you once you're in the driver's position, that you can reach all the controls, that you can see adequately out the window. So that's where it's really important to work with the CDRS and Namita dealer. These are some other cool things that I've found around the web. These are not my pictures, but these are things I just pulled offline to show you guys. That first one, a side by side, they can do like a little transfer seat on that. I could see somebody transferring there, and then that seat is actually, looks like it would be powered, so it would come up and in, powered up and into the driver's position, and then maybe they would load their wheelchair in the back. These can usually be fitted with hand controls, so a wheelchair user could drive that around their property if they wanted to. The second one looks like a farmer, and he's got a transfer seat put on his tractor, so he can still get out there and do the farming, do his work. There's, some of you may have heard of Agribility. That's an national organization, and they can help farmers, people working in farming, to access this kind of equipment. And then the third one looks like somebody was able to load their wheelchair on the back of their four-wheeler. I'm not sure what kind of device they're using there to load it, but that looks pretty cool. As long as they can keep it from getting too muddy, ideally. But it allows them to get out and hunt or go on the trails and do whatever they want to do. One thing, I just added this slide. Sorry, this was not on the original set of slides. I realized I did not mention this at all. But so I wanted to throw it in here real quick. If you have questions about bioptic driving, you can feel free to reach out to me. So this is just about driving in low vision. There are some drivers out there who, they have some visual acuity limitations. This can allow them to potentially drive, even if they don't meet the typical visual acuity standards. There are very specific parameters for this. It requires, prescription of this. It's basically like a little telescope that mounts on the glasses, and it's intended for reading traffic signs, seeing traffic lights that are coming up ahead. A person still has to be able to see well enough to see their surrounding environment, see other vehicles and important things, but this really helps with reading like signs and seeing some of the finer detail. Again, this needs to be prescribed by a vision specialist. They do require training with the CDRS, and they also have to pass with the Secretary of State to demonstrate they're able to drive with this safely. It's a cool option. If you have questions about it, you can ask me. If you think you could be a candidate for this, then maybe talk to your optometrist. If you have a low vision optometrist, they can be a very good resource, because they're typically the specialist who would refer to me for training.
I'm kind of excited because we actually financed a loan for the equipment for someone, and the loan committee, we had a whole conversation. It's just so interesting because I had never thought of such a thing. So it recently came to my attention that this equipment can make a huge difference. So thanks for sharing that.
You're welcome. Yeah, I don't know. I was thinking about driving equipment, and then I figured this would be beneficial to people too. Yeah, it's a pretty cool. A lot of people don't even know about it. Like you said, a lot of people don't even know that this is an option or that it exists. Again, there are specific parameters. Some people may have vision impairment that's too significant, and they may not be able to benefit from this. But there are a lot of candidates out there who may be a good fit. So again, talk with your optometrist about it, or vision specialists, and see what they have to say as a starting point. Funding, I want to leave time for questions, so I'll run through funding. Funding is unfortunately it's an ongoing challenge in driver rehab, in driving. We've not been able to get to a point where driving is really considered a medical necessity, which I disagree with that. I think it is necessary for people to, if they can, to be able to get themselves out, to seek medical care, get food, get groceries, take care of their self-care needs. So I can see where it should be a medical necessity, but a lot of insurance carriers and Medicare is starting to come around to it somewhat. So private insurance and Medicare, Medicaid are typically not an option for driver rehab, unfortunately. I hope that changes in the future. They will typically, though, a lot of times they will cover the clinical part of the evaluation. So that is something to consider. But there are other funding sources. If somebody was injured in an auto accident, they may be able to have their driver rehab as well as adaptive equipment covered through their auto no-fault claim, workers' comp. If somebody's injured at work and that affect their driving ability to drive, then they may be able to go through workers' comp. Some of you may be familiar with Michigan Rehabilitation Services, vocational rehab. They are they're an organization I work with a lot. So a lot of my clients are funded through MRS. So they can assist with funding, training, as well as sometimes they'll cover or help cover equipment. There are other things out there, different grants and foundations. Something like the Christopher Reeve Foundation. Sometimes I've heard of them helping people with a grant for purchasing equipment or for driving, driver rehab training. Other folks have done fundraisers, private fundraisers through their church, through GoFundMe, things like that. And then there's some private financing out there too, where someone would get a loan and have to pay that back. So that you could get more information from one of the NMETA dealers on that.
And we do financing as well for assistive technology, so that's another option. And also we can help share other sources of financing. Like I've helped as an example, a family through Children's Special Health Care. They got some money through Children's Special Health Care, and then we helped with the financing of the rest, as an example. Or those easy locks, we've bought several of those, and help the person install. What we do, it's a low interest or zero interest loans, depending on how much they need. So that's what we do here, but I can also help connect them to those other sources first, like community mental health or those other, or Michigan Rehab, if they're interested in pursuing work, that kind of thing. And I've just dropped the MRS. Thank you to think it was Jeffrey that popped those in so that people have their closest MRS office location in the chat if they'd like to click on that. So sorry to hijack you, but I wanted to let you know that we can help finance that.
That's awesome. Yeah, this is one of the top questions that I get from everyone, from all my clients, from others out in the community. This stuff is out there. There are a lot of possibilities, but how do we pay for it? And so I'm glad that you shared that information with me about the financing. I may add that to my list if you don't mind.
Yeah, I'm going to I'll send you an electronic clickable brochure, and then I can also have our office send you some physical brochures so that you can give to people. Our top loan only goes to 30,000, but that can be helpful depending on, right now, of course, they're priced out of some things, but sometimes we can find additional funding to help with that. So just to let you know, I'll get back to you with all that information.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And then here's some places that you can go for more information. If you want more information on driver rehab, you can go to aded.net. This is the ADED website. There's a tool on there where you can search for providers, so you can find someone in your area. If you're in a different part of Michigan, or if you're in another state, you can go by city, by state. And it'll tell you all the people in your state, and so you can look for who's closest to you. NMEDA, like I said, the Mobility Equipment Dealers Association, they have a website where you can also locate NMEDA member equipment vendors. If you have a local NMEDA vendor, they are a good resource. You can give them a call. You can always drop in at their storefront. Usually, and the salespeople there are always happy to answer questions. Again, Michigan Rehabilitation Services, if you're someone who is working or seeking to work, find your local office and get in touch with the counselor to see if you're a good candidate for that. And you can always, anybody that has questions can feel free to email me. I've got my email there. You can also visit my website, automobilityrehab.com, and send me a message through the website. If you want other contact info, I can always provide that through, if Tracy wants to share that or something, I can always provide a phone number too. But you can also find me through the ADED website. I'm out there in different places.
Wonderful.
Any questions remaining?
And folks, if I can read your questions if you type them in either the chat or the Q&A, or if you want to raise your hand, I can unmute you so that you can ask a question. So far, what we have is a comment from Deborah. One of the best and most comprehensive trainings I have seen lately. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
So does anyone else want to either raise your hand or put questions in the chat or the Q&A box, whichever you're most comfortable with? Okay, so Nan is saying, very cool. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I was excited to see some of those devices. I drove a modified vehicle as a youngster because my stepfather was a Vietnam veteran, and so he had driving controls in his truck. So I, of course, being a teenager, I'm going to check them out. So it's interesting to see how things have changed since then in terms of what's available. It's almost like night and day.
Yeah. That brings one thing to mind. There are, sometimes I get the question about, if I modify my vehicle with equipment, can other people drive it? Can my husband or wife or, friend still drive this? The answer is, with low tech stuff, yes. So like if somebody got low tech hand controls and a steering knob, if it's installed through, through an NMEDA installer, they would install it in a way so another person could still use the factory installed gas and brake pedals, and that would all still work. So that's a common question I get. It just made me think of that.
Oh, good. Yeah, I was amazed at all the things that you showed, especially in the high tech area. It also made me think maybe we need to collaborate to try and find money to make one available here so that people in Michigan would have that service available. So we may have to collaborate on ideas about where we could look for funding for something like that and maybe do it, or recruit folks to do it at a more appropriate agency, or who knows. But I think if
Right.
folks are having to travel all the way to Illinois to have that service, that's not ideal.
Yes, I agree. Yeah, no, that, I mean, any options to explore would be great. A couple of the one OT CDRS from Illinois will sometimes travel to Michigan to see people, but the logistics of it can be a challenge. And then, of course, the cost is up there. I think she was trying to become a vendor through MRS, so, but I'm not sure if she's gotten to that point. But yes, more options. The more options for people, the better. Yes.
Great. Well, I don't see any more questions or comments. So thank you so much, Clay. I learned so much today, and I very much appreciate all the information and all the things that are available, and that you're here and available to people, and that you did this for us today. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. I'm always glad to share. And if anybody has, like I said, if you have questions, feel free to get in touch with me. And if anybody has any suggestions, if they feel like, oh, I wish I could have heard more about this, or, I would like that input just for future presentations, so I know
Okay.
what people really want to hear. So.
Okay, if folks want to just, I'll put my email in here. Anybody that wants to email information, I can get you in touch if you need it. So there's my email, so feel free to do that. So I appreciate you, and I think we're going to need to have you back to share and to hear all the new things you've learned. So this may not be our last opportunity to hear from Clay. And so I also wanted to invite you all to join us again on Thursday, November 9th at 10 a.m. when Jaleesa Irwin of Michigan Disability Rights Coalition, their recreation specialist, is going to present on AT for recreation. I know that it's into the fall now. She does have some fall AT that she can share with us. She also has, she's very busy in spring and summer out demonstrating AT all around the state. So it's a great opportunity to have her in a time when she has time to share with us information about AT. So please join us for that. Thank you all for being here today. And so far there's a thank you very much in the chat, and a nice and informative presentation in the Q&A to share back with you, Clay. And thank you all for being here. And we'll end at this point. This recording will be available on our YouTube channel at MI-UCP in about 2 weeks. To anyone who missed it today, or if Clay wants to tell his friends and relatives to jump on and take a look at his presentation today. Thank you all. Have a great rest of your day.